Today I want to talk about some tips and tricks for doing telephone interviews. Usually your first interview with a new company is a telephone screen. It may not even be with the hiring manager, a person you might ultimately work with. Chances are you'll go through 2 or 3 people. What I want to talk about today is essentially the initial screening call and how to ace it. So I do so many interviews, but the same types of problems happen again and again. And let me just run through a few key issues. Number one is have a good telephone connection. Wherever you're calling from, try to find a landline. Don't do it outside while you're walking around. Don't do it in your car. Certainly not in your car while you're driving. Don't use headphones. Don't use speaker, for God's sakes. You need to make sure that the signal coming from you is very, very clear. I find all the time, particularly folks who are interviewing, calling in from Africa or Israel or India, they get these cheap phones, cheap headphones, bad VoIP lines, and I can barely hear it. It sounds like, and I can hear half the answers that they're giving to me. It already sets it off. Even if they're great candidates, I can't hear it. Number two is don't just walk through your resume on the call. If the interviewer says, tell me about you, don't start telling them about your whole career going back 20 years and walk through. Chances are they've got your resume, and if they don't, it's still not a good idea. Instead, talk about how your skills and your recent experience applies to the job that's been described, either in the job description that's online or it's been sent to you. But if you're lucky, the person interviewing you will give you a little intro at the beginning of the call saying, this is my understanding of the role, this is who we are, this is what we're looking for, and then focus your comments around that, not your long story about how great you are. They really want to hear how your background, your skills, your certifications, or whatever applies to this specific job that they've just described. It's also possible that when you pick up the phone, they'll immediately say, tell me about you. I would strongly recommend, if you feel comfortable doing it, saying, before I tell you about me and my skills and my background, could you tell me a little bit about your impression about this role, and maybe tell me about the company or tell me about the group, and then focus your comments around those things. The next tip is don't ramble. On most calls that I do are only about a half an hour long. I'll ask one simple question, like, tell me how you estimate your requirements. And I'm just looking for a very simple tactical answer. Instead, a lot of times I get a 15, sometimes 20-minute answer giving me the theory of estimation, all different types of estimation, whether it's points, hours, t-shirt sizing, who knows what, and then talk about what works and what doesn't work and why they don't like estimating, we shouldn't be estimating. That's not what I asked. What I asked was, how are you estimating now? Make it short and concise. And then at the end of it, say, would you like to hear more details? Or is that enough? But keep it short. And in your answers, wherever possible, use real-life stories. Give examples, use as much color as you can about what happened when you tried to fix a certain problem, use a certain technology, work with a new team. Tell a real specific story, hopefully with a beginning, middle, and end, and the end is you being successful, but also don't shy away from telling stories where things went south, where it didn't work out, but also make sure you include what you will try to do next time to keep it from going wrong, or what you did that time and how it went once you changed the process or the tool or whatever. The next tip, and this isn't really a tip, it just seems common sense, but it happens on a lot of interview calls that I do, is don't ever dish your current job, your current manager, your boss, a past job, talking about how their culture stinks, or they didn't understand the process, or didn't like Agile and they couldn't get off waterfall, or some crazy thing like that. I want to know that you're professional enough to keep your opinions about other companies, other bosses, other coworkers to yourself, and let's talk specifically about you and what you did to try to improve whatever situation you were in or try to deliver a product in whatever company you were in. My next tip is to avoid talking about money, salaries, benefits, all those type of things for as long as possible. The interview process in most companies goes on for a long time. There's usually a screening call and then a WebEx and then an in-person and usually a bunch of in-person interviews after that. Who knows what could happen in that process? One thing you do know is you're going to learn a lot about the company, the culture, the specific position, who you're going to be working with, their experience or lack of it, and your understanding of what you're going to need to do to be successful is going to change. Now, that's not always possible, of course. Certainly, if HR gets involved early in the process, they're going to ask you what your current base is, and your answer should be something like, this is my current base, and this is what I'm looking to get if I move to this new position in this new city. And these are the type of benefits I'm looking for, but I'm certainly flexible, and I'd love to talk with you more about it as I go through the interviewing process. Now, if you're talking about a hourly position and you don't already know this, most of the time you will have to reveal what your hourly rate is from the very beginning. If you don't know what it is, you need to figure it out before you get on the call. To not know what your hourly rate is on your initial call for a contracting position is just the sign of a beginner. The easy way to do it is take your base salary that you're taking currently or that you want, divide it by 2080, which is the number of 2,080 hours is the number of working hours typically in a year. And then that gives you a comparable hourly rate against your current base or what you want your current base to be. And then we recommend adding 30% because as a contractor, you're going to be covering your own travel, your own insurance, your own 401k and that type of thing. The next tip isn't so much of a tip as just a reality. Usually in a telephone interview, the interviewer knows in the first 5 minutes of you talking whether it's going to work or not. So what do? You have to ask. And stop and ask, what do you think? Am I talking about the right kind of things? Do you want more detail? You want less? Are there any areas or platforms or tools or certifications that I should be talking about that might convince you that I'm the right type of person for this? Those are hard questions to ask early in a call, but you should ask. It's possible they'll come back and say, oh, you know what, I already think you're too senior for this, or maybe you don't have the right certifications for this. And then you know it's pretty much over. But it's more likely they'll say, well, I'd like to hear more about X, Y, or Z. Finally, and this is my most important tip for interviewing is, well, it's to never interview. Certainly never just pepper your resume out to LinkedIn or Indeed or Dice or something like that and pray that somebody will come upon it after some keyword search and want to do an interview. Instead of saying, get me a Scrum Master, you want these folks who are hiring to say, get me Barc Holmes or whatever your name is. You want a person to know you already, to want to work with you because they like you and know that you've got the skills that will apply to this job. And the way to do that is to really think about who are your friends, who are the people in the industry you know already. Talk to them. They may not be able to offer you a job, but they may know somebody who is looking for somebody like you. It's also to constantly remind them that you are providing value to them, to your friends, to maybe past bosses, future bosses, and say, hey, have you read this article? Have you looked at this blog that I wrote? Or this series of tweets from this guy that I think is important and he's going in a new direction I think you'll like. They'll know that you are part of the community, part of the conversation about new techniques, new tools, new processes, whatever. When they need somebody like you, they go, there's that guy that sent me that article a couple months ago. Let's chat with him and see if he knows somebody. Or maybe he would be willing to come in and work for us. Try not to be part of a mass interview from some job posting that went out on LinkedIn, but instead be the person that executives, managers, and your friends call on because you're the person known to be very knowledgeable in a certain area. So those are my tips for better interviewing. And the last one, of course, is to not interview. So get out there, start writing, start meeting people, start providing value, and good luck.